A millionaire accidentally came across a beggar girl on a cold, snowy day. He decided to take the girl to his house. The next day, he had to change the locks and hire security because the girl had... On a chilly December morning, the streets of New York were lightly dusted with frost. The city was alive with activity, but the biting wind slicing through the skyscrapers made everything feel even colder. Michael, a middle-aged millionaire, was rushing to an important business meeting. The deals and numbers he had to negotiate completely consumed his thoughts. Known for his relentless focus, Michael was the kind of man who, despite his success, always seemed to carry a weight on his shoulders. As he crossed one of the busy intersections downtown, something unusual caught his attention. A young girl, frail and dressed in visibly tattered clothes, sat on the cold sidewalk with a small plastic cup in front of her. Her large eyes, though dim, followed the people rushing past with a mix of hopelessness and acceptance. Normally, Michael wasn't one to notice the world around him, but this time, an unfamiliar tightness gripped his chest as he saw her. He tried to look away and keep walking, but something about the scene made him pause. He slowed down, and before he realized what he was doing, he stopped in front of her. "Hi," Michael said, his voice softer than he expected. "What's your name?" The girl lifted her eyes slowly, hesitating before answering. "Leah, sir," she whispered, her voice barely rising above the noise of the city. A surge of compassion washed over Michael, catching him off guard. He wasn't the kind of man who was susceptible to emotion. Logic and control had always been the driving forces in both his career and his entire life. But on this freezing morning, something changed. "What are you doing out here, Leah?" he asked, already dreading the answer he knew was coming. "I'm cold and hungry," she said quietly, her head dropping as if she were embarrassed. Michael couldn't bring himself to walk away. For a few moments, something about Leah's frailty stirred memories within him, things he had long buried. Without a second thought, he kneeled beside her. "Come with me," he said, offering his hand. "Let's get you somewhere warm, and I'll get you something to eat." Leah hesitated. She had heard empty promises before, but there was something in Michael's voice that made her want to believe him. There was an undeniable weight in her eyes, something far too heavy for someone so young to carry. "Are you feeling any better?" Michael asked softly, careful not to push her too quickly or too hard. Leah gave a small nod, though her gaze remained fixed on the floor. "Yes, sir. Thank you for everything." The formality in her voice tugged at Michael, a clear sign she was keeping him at arm's length. It was as though she was building a wall between them, a defense against the world she had been forced to endure. He leaned in a little, trying to keep his tone calm and reassuring. "You don't have to call me Sir, Leah. My name's Michael. You can talk to me. I'm here for you." Leah hesitated, her tiny hands clutching the blanket like it was a lifeline. He could see her struggling, torn between the urge to speak and the instinct to keep her pain locked away. After what felt like an eternity, she finally took a deep breath and started talking. "It's been really tough since my dad left," she whispered. "One night, they had a huge fight. I heard my mum crying, and then he was gone. He took me with him, but after a few days in the city," her voice was barely audible, "he and my mum, they always fought. I didn't get everything they argued about, but I knew it was serious. He just left me here." Michael's chest tightened as he listened, the heartbreak in her voice echoing through him. Abandonment, fear. He could hear it all. He knew too well what it was like to feel powerless, at the mercy of choices you didn't make. Old memories of his own childhood, his father's harsh words and impossible demands, flickered in the back of his mind, but he pushed them away, staying focused on Leah. "And your mom?" he asked gently. Leah shook her head, her eyes brimming with tears. I don't know where she is. My dad wouldn't let me talk to her. He said she didn't care about me anymore. But I don't believe him. I can't believe him. Michael leaned back, trying to take in everything she had shared. This was so much worse than he had expected. Leah wasn't just lost. She had been broken by the very people meant to love and protect her. I'm so sorry, Leah, he said quietly. No one should have to go through what you've been through. Leah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, sniffling softly. It's not your fault. You've been so good to me. I don't even know why you're helping, but thank you. Michael gave a small smile, one that carried a hint of sorrow. I'm helping you because you deserve it, Leah. You deserve to feel safe and be cared for. And I promise you I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you're all right. For a few seconds, silence filled the room. The soft hum of the heater, the only sound breaking the stillness. Leah's eyes scanned Michael's face, as if searching for proof that she could truly trust him. Whatever she found there seemed to comfort her, because after a pause she nodded. A slight, hopeful smile flickered through her tears. Okay, she whispered softly. Michael felt a wave of emotion, a blend of relief and determination. He had made a promise to Leah, and he was determined to follow through. But as he sat there, watching her curl up on the couch, a new thought began to form in his mind. He couldn't just offer short-term help. To really help Leah, he needed to find her mother, to understand the truth of what had happened between her parents. That was the only way he could give her the lasting safety and stability she needed. Yet, as much as it made sense, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that the truth might be far more difficult and heartbreaking than he expected. But there was no turning back now. He was already a part of Leah's world, and walking away wasn't an option. Leah, he said quietly, breaking the silence, I'm going to help you find your mom. We'll figure this out together, okay? Leah's eyes widened, her face a mix of fear and hope. Do you really think we can find her? Michael nodded firmly. I do. And I won't stop until we do. As he spoke, a deep sense of resolve settled over him. This wasn't just about helping a young girl anymore. It was about facing the ghosts from his own past and finding a way to heal the wounds he had carried for too long. By helping Leah, maybe, just maybe, he could find some peace for himself too. Outside, the night descended over New York, the city's usual buzz quieting as the streets emptied. Inside Michael's apartment, the air was different. Leah had fallen asleep on the couch, her small body wrapped in a blanket. Her breathing was even, but even in her sleep, her face held a trace of sadness that pulled at Michael's heart. He watched her for a moment, the weight of her story heavy in his mind. He couldn't shake the sense that this whole situation hit too close to home, stirring something familiar deep within him. As he sat across from Leah in the armchair, old memories he thought he had long buried started to creep back into his mind, uninvited and unwelcome. He shut his eyes, hoping to block them out, but it was useless. The past always had a way of sneaking back when he least expected it. His thoughts drifted to his childhood, back to that house where he grew up. It was a grand estate, one that should have been filled with warmth, but for him it never was. The long, cold hallways echoed with conversations that never seemed to bring good news. His father, a rigid and imposing figure, seemed to dominate every corner, even when he wasn't physically there. Michael recalled the constant pressure, the unyielding criticism. Nothing he ever did seemed to measure up. If he earned an A on his report card, his father would ask why it wasn't an A+. If he excelled at sports, his father would remind him there was always someone better. Love didn't drive his father. It was control. Control over every part of Michael's life, shaping him into the perfect image his father envisioned. "Don't let me down, Michael," his father's voice echoed in his mind, sharp and unforgiving. "You have to be the best. Anything less is failure." Michael opened his eyes, his chest tightening with the same old anxiety. Even after all these years, his father's words still had the power to sting. He had spent his life running from that shadow, building his own success, his own wealth, just to prove he could do it on his own terms. But the price of that success was only now becoming clear to him. Looking over at Leah, sleeping soundly, he wondered if she felt the same way. Had she been judged, made to feel like she was never enough? Had her parents, the very people meant to love her without question, let her down, just like Michael's father had done to him? The thought sparked anger in him, anger at the world for letting kids like Leah suffer. But it also fueled his resolve. He couldn't change his past, but he could do something for Leah's future. He could be the one who finally stood up for her, who told her, "You're enough, just as you are." As the night wore on, Michael paced the room, lost in the collision of his own memories and the present moment. He recalled the countless fights with his father, those moments when he had wanted to speak up, but the fear of confrontation always held him back. He thought about all the times he stayed silent, too scared to voice his opinion, too worried about the fallout. One night, though, had stuck with him more than any other, a night that had haunted him for years. He was just 12, sitting at the dinner table with his parents. His father had been talking about the family business, about how one day Michael would be the one to take over and how he needed to learn to make sacrifices. As usual, Michael had been quiet, listening, until his father said something that pushed him over the edge. "You have to be cutthroat in this world, Michael," his father had said. "Compassion is for the weak. If you want to succeed, you can't let your feelings interfere." That was when Michael looked up. Something inside him was breaking. "But what if I don't want to be like you?" he had burst out, his voice trembling with both fear and defiance. The room went dead silent. His father had stared at him, his face unreadable. Slowly, he had placed his utensils down and folded his hands on the table. "Excuse me?" his father had said, his voice eerily calm. Michael knew at that moment he had crossed a line, but there was no turning back now. His heart raced, but he held firm. "I don't want to be ruthless," he had said, his voice quieter but still steady. "I don't want to hurt people just to get what I want." His father said nothing for a long moment. Then, with an icy smile, he leaned back in his chair. "You're weak, Michael," he had said, his words heavy with disappointment. "And that's why you'll never be good enough." Those words stuck with Michael, shaping every choice he made since. He had promised himself he would never be weak or show any vulnerability. But now, as he looked at Leah, he realized those defenses had not only kept others out, but had also closed off his own heart. He exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the memories settle on him. But instead of brushing them aside, he allowed them to linger. He needed to confront the past if he had any hope of helping Leah face hers. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Michael made up his mind. He had to find Leah's mother, no doubt about it. But there was more at stake. He had to confront the ghosts of his past, the pain he'd been carrying for too long. For years, he had let those memories weigh him down. Now, it was time to take back control. He walked over to the couch, where Leah was sleeping, and gently pulled the blanket back over her. She stirred a little, mumbling something in her sleep. Michael stood there for a moment, watching her, emotions swirling inside him. Sadness, hope, determination. "Sleep tight, Leah," he whispered. "Things are going to change." He turned away, bracing himself for what lay ahead, wondering if by helping Leah, he might finally find the peace he had always been searching for. The early light of dawn spread over the New York City skyline, casting everything in a soft golden glow. But Michael barely noticed as he made his way through the quiet streets. His mind was focused on one thing: finding Leah's mother. He had spent the morning on the phone, calling in every favor, using all the connections he had built up over the years to dig up any clue about Emily, a woman from his distant past. It felt odd, reopening those old chapters of his life, but he knew he had to. Leah's future hung in the balance. His search had led him to a worn-down neighborhood on the city's edge, a place that had clearly seen better days. The buildings were old, paint chipping away, and the streets were quiet, with the air of a community that had long since passed its prime. As he walked, an unsettling feeling crept up inside him. He was about to dig up something that perhaps should have stayed buried. He reached the address he had been given, an old apartment building, its fire escapes rusted, windows stained. Michael paused at the entrance, drawing in a deep breath. He had faced powerful CEOs, closed million-dollar deals without flinching. But this felt different. This was personal. With renewed resolve, he pushed open the door and climbed the creaky stairs to the second floor. He found what he was looking for: apartment 2B. The door was slightly open, and Michael hesitated before gently knocking. "Emily?" he called out, his voice soft but echoing in the empty hallway. "Emily, are you there?" There was a moment of silence, and then, slowly, the door opened wider. Standing there was a woman who looked like life had hit her hard. Her hair was messy, her clothes were worn, and her eyes held a deep, settled sadness that had been there for far too long. "Michael?" she asked, her voice a mix of surprise and uncertainty. "What are you doing here?" Michael stepped forward, his heart racing. It had been years since he'd last seen Emily, not since they went their separate ways after high school. Even after all this time, there was no mistaking her. She was the same woman he'd once loved, though life had clearly taken its toll on her. "I'm here about Leah," Michael replied softly, though his tone was resolute. "She's in trouble, Emily. She needs you." At the mention of Leah's name, Emily's eyes grew wide, and a flicker of panic flashed across her face. She pushed the door open fully, gesturing for Michael to come in. The apartment was cramped and minimally furnished, with just the basics. It was obvious Emily had been struggling to get by. As Michael took in the sight, he noticed the weariness in her body language, the years of hardship written into every movement. "Is she okay?" Emily asked, her voice shaky as she shut the door behind him. "I thought she was with her dad." Michael nodded, but his face remained serious. "She was, but he left her. Emily, he left her out there with nothing. I found her yesterday, begging for food. She needs you. She needs her mom." Emily collapsed into a chair, her face turning pale as guilt washed over her. "I didn't know," she murmured. "I had no idea he would do that. I thought he'd at least take care of her." She shook her head, her words trailing off as regret hung heavy in the room. Michael watched her closely, trying to gauge her reaction. He could see the pain in her eyes, the regret weighing her down. But there was also something else, something that gave him a glimmer of hope. "Emily," he said quietly, sitting down across from her, "I know life hasn't been easy for you, but Leah needs you now more than ever. She's been through a lot and she's scared. She needs to know she's not alone, that someone still cares about her." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. "I've made so many mistakes, Michael," she choked out, her voice breaking. "I thought I was doing the right thing for her. But I was wrong. I made a mistake, Michael said softly, as he reached for Emily's hand. It's not too late, Emily. You can still be there for her. We can figure this out together. For a while, Emily didn't respond. She just sat, staring at their joined hands, her mind elsewhere. Eventually, she gave a slow nod. You're right, she whispered. I need to do this. For Leah. Michael felt a wave of relief wash over him. This wasn't going to be easy. None of it was. But at least Emily was ready to try. That was something. I'll take you to her, Michael said, rising to his feet. She's staying at my place. She's safe, but she's been through a lot. Seeing you will mean everything to her. Emily stood up too, though her movements were slow, hesitant, like she was unsure of what awaited her. I don't know if she'll even want to see me, she admitted quietly. After everything she will, Michael said, his tone steady. She's your daughter, Emily. She needs you now more than ever. As they left the apartment and walked toward his car, Emily stayed silent, lost in her thoughts. Michael didn't push her to speak. He understood. She was trying to come to terms with everything. The car ride back to Michael's apartment was thick with tension, the kind that settled deep and stayed. Michael glanced at Emily now and then, noticing her hands clenched tightly in her lap, knuckles white. Emily, he said softly, pulling up in front of his building, you can do this. Leah needs to know you're here for her. Emily drew a shaky breath, giving a slight nod. I know, she whispered, but I'm scared, Michael. I don't want to fail her again. You won't, Michael said with quiet assurance. You're here now, and that's what matters. They stepped out of the car and made their way up to the apartment. With each step, the air between them grew heavier, but Michael knew they were on the right path. When he opened the door, they found Leah on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, though it was clear her mind was elsewhere. As soon as the door creaked open, she turned her head, her eyes widening when she saw Emily standing in the doorway. Leah? Her voice was soft, unsure, as if she couldn't fully grasp what was happening in front of her. Emily moved closer, her voice unsteady. It's me, honey, I'm right here. Leah hesitated, staring at her for a moment, like she was trying to figure out if it was real. Then all at once, she leapt off the couch, rushing into her mother's arms, tears pouring down her face. Emily wrapped her up tightly, her own tears falling as she whispered comforting words into Leah's hair. Michael stood in the doorway, emotions swelling in his chest. He knew this was just the start of what would be a tough road for both of them. But in this moment, he allowed himself to feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way through this together. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft murmur of Emily soothing Leah, their whispered reassurances blending with the faint sounds of the city beyond the windows. Michael took a step back, giving them space, though his heart was caught up in the moment. Seeing Leah cling to her mother, tears streaming down her face, stirred something inside him, feelings that were at once strange and familiar. After a few minutes, Emily gently led Leah back to the couch, the two of them sitting close, their hands intertwined. Michael stayed nearby, watching, his mind racing. He had come to help Leah reconnect with her mom, but now something deeper was bothering him, something that didn't quite add up. Leah looked up at Emily, her voice shaky. Mom, why did Dad leave me? What did I do wrong? Emily's face contorted with sorrow as she hugged Leah even closer. Oh, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. Your dad, he made a terrible choice. This is not your fault. Michael felt a pang in his chest as he heard those words. He had always thought of himself as someone who could stay emotionally detached, able to keep his feelings in check. But now, He found it hard to hold himself together. It wasn't just what Emily was saying. It was the way she looked at Leah, as though there was more she wasn't telling, as if she was hiding something. As if reading his mind, Emily glanced up at Michael, her eyes filled with gratitude and something else he couldn't quite figure out. She paused for a moment, as if gathering the courage to continue. Her voice was soft, uncertain. "Michael, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." The room seemed to hold its breath, the gravity of her words hanging heavy in the silence. Michael's heart raced in his chest, his thoughts spiraling through countless possibilities. He could see the fear in Emily's eyes, the way she clutched Leah's hand like it was her only source of strength. "What is it, Emily?" he asked, his voice calm, though inside he was anything but. Emily took a deep breath, her eyes darting between Michael and Leah. "Michael, Leah's father isn't who you think. He's not just some guy I met after high school. He's you." For a second, it felt like time stopped. Michael stared at her, his mind trying to grasp what she had just said. It was as if everything he thought he knew had been flipped upside down. "I'm Leah's father," he whispered, the words barely audible, as if saying them made them more real. Emily nodded, tears beginning to fill her eyes. "Yes, Michael, she's your daughter. I found out I was pregnant a few months after that night we reconnected. But by then, you'd already left for college, and I didn't know how to tell you, so I didn't." A flood of emotions crashed over Michael. Shock, disbelief, anger, and something deeper. Something so intense he couldn't quite put a name to it. He looked over at Leah, who gazed up at him with wide, confused eyes. "Dad?" Leah's voice was small, laced with uncertainty. Michael took a step closer, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it might explode. "Leah, I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know." Leah stared at him, her eyes a mix of hope and fear. "You're really my dad?" Michael kneeled down in front of her, his hands shaking as he gently took hers. "Yes, Leah, I'm your dad. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Leah continued to look at him, her gaze searching him. Her eyes searched his face, as if trying to find the truth in his words. Slowly, she leaned forward, wrapping her small arms around his neck. Michael felt his heart swell as he held her close, the warmth of her tiny body against his. For the first time in his life, Michael experienced something entirely new, a profound, unconditional love that left him breathless. This was his daughter, his own flesh and blood. The mere thought of her going through so much pain tore something deep within him. Emily stood watching them, her face wet with tears, though a glimmer of relief softened her expression. She had held on to this secret for so long, and now, at last, it was out in the open. "I'm so sorry, Michael," Emily whispered. "I should have told you sooner, but I was scared. I didn't know how you'd react. And then everything got so complicated with Leah's father, the man she thought was her dad." Michael looked at her, still holding Leah tight. "I understand, Emily. But now that I know, everything's going to change. I'll be here for her, for both of you. We'll work through this together." Leah pulled back slightly, her tear-filled eyes wide as she looked up at Michael. "Are you really going to stay, Dad? You won't leave me like he did?" The fear in her voice shattered his heart, knowing she had even the slightest doubt. He gently cupped her cheek, his voice steady and full of resolve. "I'm not going anywhere, Leah. I promise you that. You're my daughter, and I'll always be here for you, no matter what." Leah's face crumpled as fresh tears came, but this time they carried a sense of relief, Michael hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of his new reality sinking in. He was a father. Father to this brave, beautiful little girl who had already endured so much. As the three of them sat together in the quiet apartment, Michael realized his life would never be the same. For years he had focused on building his fortune, accumulating wealth and power. But none of that mattered now. What truly mattered was the fragile little family in front of him. His daughter, whom he had never known, and the woman who had once held his heart. Michael exhaled deeply, his mind already buzzing with thoughts of what lay ahead. There were so many decisions to make, so many obstacles to overcome. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of direction, something worth fighting for, protecting, and cherishing. He glanced over at Emily, who, through her tears, offered him a faint, hopeful smile. Then he looked down at Leah, who was clinging tightly to him, as if she feared he might vanish. Michael understood that the journey ahead wouldn't be simple, but he felt confident he could face whatever came his way, as long as they were together. "We're going to be okay," he murmured, his voice steady with resolve. "We're a family now, and that's never going to change." Leah pressed her head into his chest, her small fingers gripping his shirt. "I love you, Dad," she whispered softly. Tears stung Michael's eyes as he held her even closer. "I love you too, Leah. More than anything." Sitting there with them, holding each other tight, Michael couldn't help but feel like this was the start of something new, something better. He had experienced so much loss in his life. But now, he had found something precious, something he didn't even realize he was missing. And he was determined not to let it slip away. The revelation that he was a father had rocked Michael to his core, yet it had also sparked a fierce determination within him, a drive to protect Leah and Emily, to make up for the time they'd lost. The next few days were an emotional roller coaster filled with tough choices, as Michael tried to embrace his new reality as a dad. Yet, amid the chaos, one unresolved issue lingered: his own father. Michael knew that if he wanted to truly move forward and be the father Leah needed, he would have to confront the man who had loomed so large in his life, the man whose harsh criticisms and relentless expectations still haunted him. For years, he had avoided this confrontation, but now there was no running from it. He needed to free himself from the hold his father had on him. On a chilly afternoon, Michael finally decided to make the call. He had been pacing the living room, phone in hand, torn between hesitation and resolve. In the next room, Emily and Leah were playing a board game they'd found in the apartment's closet. Their laughter, light and carefree, floated through the closed door, a sharp contrast to the tension building inside him. Taking a steady breath, he dialed the number. It rang once, before the familiar, stern voice answered. Michael. His father's voice was as cold and commanding as ever. It had been years. Michael gritted his teeth, fighting to keep his voice level. "It has," he answered, his heart racing. "We need to meet. Face to face." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Michael could almost picture his father's calculating look, probably trying to figure out what prompted this sudden call. "All right," his father finally said. "Come by the house tomorrow afternoon." Michael agreed, a tightness forming in his chest as he hung up. He hadn't set foot in that house for what felt like a lifetime. Not since he walked away, determined to carve out his own life. The thought of going back now, of confronting the man who had weighed so heavily on his mind for years, left him feeling a strange mix of fear and determination. The next day, Michael drove back to the old family home, the place where his childhood memories lingered. The drive was long, filled with reflections on a past shaped by high expectations, where he learned early on that emotions were weaknesses and success was the only measure of value. The estate hadn't changed, still as grand and intimidating as ever, with gardens that had always seemed more like a prison than a place of peace. When he pulled up to the entrance, Michael took a deep breath, preparing himself for what lay ahead. His father was waiting in the study, a room that always smelled of worn leather and cigars. The moment Michael entered, the familiar weight of his past pressed down on him. His father sat behind the big oak desk, his face unreadable, though his eyes were sharp and judgmental. "Michael," his father said, not bothering to stand, "what brings you back after all these years?" Michael shut the door behind him, fists tightening at his sides. "I'm not here for pleasantries," he said firmly. "There are things we need to settle, things that have gone unsaid for far too long." His father raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his eyes, as though Michael's boldness was a game to him. "Oh? And what might those be?" Michael stepped closer, anger simmering beneath the surface. "You know exactly what I mean, the way you controlled every part of my life, the impossible standards you set. I spent my entire childhood trying to meet your expectations, and no matter how hard I tried, it was never good enough." His father's face remained neutral, almost indifferent, as though he'd heard it all before. "I pushed you because I saw your potential, Michael. I wanted to make sure you didn't squander it. And look at you now, a successful man, a millionaire. It seems like my approach paid off. Your approach." Michael nearly sneered as he replied, "You turned me into a hollow version of myself. I spent my entire life trying to prove myself to you, trying to be the person you wanted me to be. But in doing so, I lost sight of who I really am." His father finally rose from his chair, moving with purpose as he circled the desk to stand in front of Michael. "Is that what you think? That all of this was meant to destroy you? You're tougher because of it. You learned how to be cutthroat, how to put success above feelings. That's how you made it in this world." Michael shook his head, a bitter laugh slipping out. "Made it? I barely lived. I shut myself off from everyone, terrified of showing any vulnerability. I thought that if anyone saw me for who I really was, they'd see that I wasn't the perfect son you demanded I be." His father's gaze tightened, the first hint of emotion breaking through his cold demeanor. "And what are you now, Michael? Some emotional sap who thinks feelings are going to get him ahead in life? Is that what this is about?" "This isn't about work or success," Michael said, his voice rising in frustration. "This is about family. It's about knowing what it means to truly care for someone, to protect them not because they're a tool to success, but because they're part of you. I have a daughter, and I'm not making the same mistakes with her that you made with me." His father's expression flickered, just for a moment, as if the mention of a grandchild had caught him off guard. "A daughter?" he asked, his voice slightly softer, but still holding a trace of doubt. "Yes, a daughter," Michael replied firmly, "and she's my whole world. I'm not going to raise her the way you raised me, always feeling like I'm falling short. I'll be there for her, to show her that she's loved and appreciated for who she is, not just for what she can accomplish." His father looked at him for what felt like an eternity, the tension between them thick and suffocating. Then finally, he sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. It was the first time Michael had ever seen him show any sign of surrender. "I guess I made some mistakes," his father admitted quietly. "I did what I thought was right, what I thought would make you stronger. But maybe I got it wrong." Michael was astounded by his father's remarks, and couldn't believe that this man, whom he had always perceived as rigid and unapologetic, could admit to being wrong. For years, Michael had viewed him as someone unyielding. But now, as his father faced the resolve in his son's eyes, there was a new vulnerability in him, almost as if he were just a regular man. "I don't need your apologies," Michael replied, his tone softening. "But I do need you to realize that things are different now. I'm not that scared little kid anymore. I'm a dad now, and I'm going to handle things my own way." His father slowly nodded, a faint, sorrowful smile playing at the edges of his lips. "You've grown, Michael. You've become your own person. I suppose that's all I ever really wanted." For the first time in his life, Michael felt a sense of closure. The control his father once had over him was finally fading. He hadn't become the man his father had tried to mold, and that was perfectly fine. He had become something different, something better, a father who would protect his daughter at all costs. Without saying anything more, Michael turned and walked out of the study. With each step, the weight on his shoulders lifted. He had faced his past, confronted the man who had shaped so much of his life. And now, he was free to move on. As he drove back to his place, back to Leah and Emily, Michael felt a deep sense of calm settle over him. He had done what he needed to do. Now he could focus on what truly mattered, building a future with his daughter and the woman he once loved. When he opened the door to his apartment, Leah was the first to greet him, her face lighting up as she ran into his arms. Michael scooped her up, holding her close. For the first time, he truly felt like he was right where he belonged. "We're going to be okay," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. "We're going to be just fine." And for the first time in a long time, he actually believed it. In the days following the confrontation with Leah's former guardian, there was an uneasy calm. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that the man's departure was only temporary, a pause before the next storm. His words, "You haven't seen the last of me," echoed in Michael's mind, a constant reminder that the danger wasn't over yet. Instead of letting fear consume him, Michael used it to strengthen his determination. He would stop at nothing to ensure Leah and Emily were safe. Over the next few days, he discreetly took steps to improve the security of their home. He installed new door locks, added surveillance cameras, and even contacted a lawyer to begin the process of getting a restraining order. He wasn't willing to take any risks. Every night, before he could relax, Michael made sure the windows were secured and the alarm system was activated. But it wasn't just their physical safety that concerned him. Michael knew that Leah's emotional state was equally important. The recent encounter had rattled her, dredging up old fears she had just started to overcome. She was noticeably quieter, with the uncertainty that had returned to her world, dimming her once vivacious and playful spirit. One evening, after a particularly silent dinner, Michael decided it was time to address the issue directly. Leah sat on the couch, curled up with a book, though her mind seemed far away. Her gaze was distant, her focus elsewhere. Michael joined her, his heart heavy at the sight of his usually vibrant daughter so withdrawn. "Hey, Leah," he said softly, hoping to get her attention. "Do you want to talk about what happened?" Leah looked up at him, uncertainty in her expression. She closed her book and leaned into him, finding solace in his presence. "Is he really gone, Dad? Is he going to come back?" Leah asked, her voice full of fear. Michael wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "He's gone, honey. And I'm doing everything I can to make sure he never comes near us again. I promise. You're safe here." Leah nodded, though the worry in her eyes lingered. "I'm scared," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "What if he tries to take me away?" The thought stirred a deep anger in Michael, but he kept his tone steady and comforting. "That's not going to happen. I won't let him, and neither will your mum. We're going to protect you, no matter what." Emily, who had been quietly listening from the kitchen, came over and joined them on the couch, wrapping her arms around both Michael and Leah. "We're in this together," she said gently, her voice warm with affection. "We're a family, and nothing is going to change that. Nobody's going to take you away from us," Michael said firmly. Leah glanced between them, searching their faces for some sort of assurance. Seeing the unwavering love and determination in their eyes, she seemed to relax, her small frame loosening from the tension. "Okay," she whispered, leaning in closer to them. "I trust you." They stayed close, huddled together on the couch, drawing strength from one another. Michael felt an overwhelming protectiveness rise inside him. This was his family, and he would stop at nothing to keep them safe. The next morning, Michael made another move to safeguard them. He met with the lawyer, who promised to expedite the restraining order. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was one more layer of protection, another barrier to keep the threat at bay. Michael also arranged to have a panic button app installed on both Emily and Leah's phones, giving them instant access to the police if they ever felt in danger. It was a small comfort, but it helped lighten the heavy anxiety that had been hanging over them like a storm cloud. As the days turned into weeks, the tension slowly started to ease. The man never came back, and the security measures Michael had put in place seemed to be working. Little by little, Leah regained her confidence, her laughter slowly returning as she felt more comfortable in her world again. One evening, after tucking Leah into bed, Michael and Emily sat together on the balcony, watching the city lights sparkle in the distance. The air had that cool, crisp feel that hinted at a change of season, a new beginning. "I think she's finally starting to feel safe again," Emily said, quietly, resting her hand on Michael's knee. "You've done so much to protect us, Michael. I don't even know how to thank you." Michael shook his head, his eyes fixed on the city skyline. "You don't need to thank me, Emily. I'm just doing what I need to do, what any father would." Emily smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. "Not every father would go this far. You've given her a sense of security she's never had before, and you've given me something I thought I'd lost. Hope." Michael turned to look at her, his heart swelling. "We've given each other hope," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I found something with you and Leah that I never thought I'd have. A family, a purpose, and nothing is going to take that away from us." They sat quietly for a while, letting the weight of their journey sink in. It hadn't been an easy road. Challenges still lay ahead, but they had weathered the worst of it. They had faced their fears head-on and emerged stronger together. As the evening deepened, they eventually returned indoors, shutting the balcony door behind them. The apartment felt cozy and secure, a safe haven from the world outside. Michael double-checked the locks, more out of routine than necessity, before joining Emily in bed. Lying there, listening to the gentle hum of the city and the peaceful breaths of the two people he cherished most, Michael felt a sense of calm wash over him. They were safe, they were together, and that was everything. No matter what the future might bring, he knew they would face it as a family. That knowledge gave him the strength to let go of the lingering doubts and fears. They had made it through the darkness. Now, they were stepping into the light. In that light, they would build a future filled with love, security, and the unbreakable bonds of a family that had fought to stay whole. In the weeks that followed, life gradually returned to normal. Michael, Emily, and Leah's pervasive fear slowly subsided, giving way to cautious optimism. The man who had threatened their peace was gone. And with each passing day, their confidence grew that he wasn't coming back. But it wasn't just the absence of danger that mattered. The real task was healing the bonds that had been stretched and tested. The confrontation had severely shaken Leah, who was gradually regaining her bright, jovial spirit. The frequent nightmares were easing, and her laughter was beginning to fill the apartment again, bringing warmth and hope. Michael and Emily noticed the shift, but knew that Leah still needed comfort. Her world had been turned upside down more than once, and it would take time for her to fully trust the stability they were trying to create. One Saturday morning, Michael decided to do something special for both Leah and Emily, something to reinforce the sense of family they were rebuilding. He got up early, made breakfast, and suggested they take a day trip, just the three of them, away from the city to a place where they could relax and simply enjoy being together. There was a park I used to visit a lot when I was a kid, Michael mentioned, as they gathered around the kitchen table, the smell of fresh pancakes and syrup in the air. It's got big open areas, a lake and tons of space to run around. I was thinking we could pack a picnic and spend the day there, he continued. Leah's face lit up at the suggestion. Can we bring a kite? I've never flown one before. Michael grinned, his heart warming at her enthusiasm. Absolutely. We'll grab one on the way, he said. Emily reached over and squeezed Michael's hand. That sounds amazing, Michael. We could all use a day like that, she added. They spent the rest of the morning getting ready, putting together a basket filled with sandwiches, fruit, and a few sweet snacks. Michael could feel the mood in the apartment shift as they prepared. The heaviness that had been hanging over them for so long was finally starting to lift, replaced with a lightness that was long overdue. The drive to the park was full of laughter and conversation. Leah, sitting in the back seat, excitedly listed all the things she wanted to do: fly the kite, explore the trails, and maybe even dip her toes in the lake if it wasn't too chilly. Michael listened with a smile, glancing over at Emily, who was watching Leah with a peaceful look on her face. For the first time in what felt like forever, things seemed to fall into place. It was better than just normal. It felt right. When they arrived at the park, Michael was surprised to see how similar it still appeared to be to his last visit. The tall trees still lined the paths, their leaves whispering softly in the breeze. The lake sparkled in the sunlight, its surface smooth and inviting, and the wide-open fields were ideal for running, playing, and, of course, kite flying. They found a quiet spot by the lake and laid out their picnic blanket. Leah wasted no time pulling out the kite they had bought on the way. It was brightly colored with long, fluttering tails, and she could hardly contain her excitement as Michael showed her how to set it up. Okay, Leah. Here's what you do, Michael instructed. He held the kite while Leah stood a few feet away, holding onto the string tightly. You're going to start running, and when I tell you, let go of the kite and keep running. The wind will take it from there. Leah nodded, her face serious and focused. I'm ready. All right, Michael said, feeling a rush of excitement himself. Go! Leah took off, her small legs moving as quickly as they could. Michael let go of the kite, and it soared into the sky, its tail fluttering behind it. Leah glanced back, her face lighting up with a big smile as she watched the kite rise higher and higher. It's flying, Dad! It's really flying, she yelled, her voice full of joy. Michael jogged over, laughing as he watched her run with the kite string tightly in her hands. Emily came up to join them, clapping and cheering as Leah kept the kite steady, guiding it with surprising control for her first time. They spent hours at the park, playing games, wandering the trails, and simply enjoying the gorgeous day. They walked along the lake's edge, their feet brushing the cool water, talking about anything and everything. It was a day filled with simple pleasures, but for Michael, it was one of the most meaningful days he could remember. Later, as the sun began to set, they returned to their picnic blanket, sitting together and watching the sky turn soft shades of pink and orange. Leah leaned against Michael, her head resting on his shoulder, while Emily sat close beside them, her hand wrapped in Michael's. This was the best day ever, Leah whispered sleepily, her eyes half closed. Michael kissed the top of her head, his heart full. "I'm glad you had fun, sweetheart." Emily smiled at them, her heart swelling as she looked at the two people she loved most in the world. "We should do this more often," she said quietly. "Make it a tradition." Michael nodded, realizing that they had entered a new phase. Something better, hope, happiness, and the quiet joy of creating a life together was taking the place of the fear and uncertainty that had previously loomed over their lives. As they packed up and headed back to the car, with Leah's kite trailing behind him, Michael felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, an overwhelming sense of peace. The shadows of the past were finally lifting, and in their place, a brighter future was starting to shine through. When they got home that evening, Leah went straight to bed, worn out but happy. Michael and Emily stayed in the living room a bit longer, enjoying the peacefulness after a day filled with laughter and love. "I think today was a turning point," Emily said, leaning into Michael as they relaxed on the couch. "We're finding our way back to each other, reconnecting with what truly matters." Michael pulled her close, wrapping his arm around her. "We are. And I won't let anything come between us now. We've been through too much," Emily said, looking up at him, her eyes filled with emotion. "You've given us so much, Michael. You've been the father Leah needed and gave me hope when I thought it was gone." Michael kissed her gently, feeling how deep their bond had grown in that simple moment. "You've given me just as much, Emily. Together, we've built something real, something worth holding on to." They sat in the peaceful quiet of their home, clinging to each other as the world outside seemed to disappear. The struggles they'd faced hadn't vanished, but they no longer felt impossible. They were a family now, and they knew that no challenge was too great if they faced it together. As the night wore on and they headed to bed, Michael felt a sense of wholeness, like the pieces of his life were finally falling into place. They were creating something beautiful, something lasting, and for the first time, he truly believed they were going to be all right. They had faced the darkness and come out stronger, ready to embrace the light of a new chapter. As the days became weeks, the fragile peace Michael, Emily, and Leah had worked so hard to achieve started to feel more secure. The happiness from their recent trip still lingered, filling their home with laughter and love again. It seemed like the worst was behind them, and the ghosts of their past had finally been laid to rest. But just as they were beginning to relax, convinced they could move on without looking over their shoulders, the past came crashing back into their lives. It started with a phone call. Michael was at his desk at work, reviewing some papers, when his phone buzzed. The number wasn't familiar, but something told him to pick up. As soon as he heard the voice on the other line, his heart dropped. "Mr. Carter," the voice said, cold and official. "This is Detective Samuel from the NYPD. We need to talk about something involving your family." A chill of dread tightened in Michael's stomach. "What's this about, Detective?" "It's regarding the man who showed up at your house a few weeks ago," the detective replied. "We've got new information that suggests he may be planning to come back. We believe he's a serious threat, and we need to take precautions." Michael's thoughts raced as the detective laid out the situation. This man had been seen near their apartment multiple times, lingering, watching. He hadn't made a move yet, but it was clear he wasn't going away anytime soon. The restraining order was still active, but that piece of paper wouldn't stop him if he decided to take action. "We're assigning an officer to monitor your building," Detective Samuel said. "Still, we strongly advise you to take extra precautions. If you have a safer place to stay for a bit, you should consider it." A surge of anger and frustration boiled up inside Michael. They had worked so hard to create a stable and safe life for Leah, to offer her some sense of security. And now, it felt like everything was at risk again. But underneath the anger, there was something else. Fear. fear that this time, the man might not stay on the sidelines. He might make a move. "Thanks, Detective," Michael said, his voice tight with emotion. "I'll do what you suggest." After hanging up the phone, Michael leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He needed to act fast, to protect his family before things escalated. But above all, he needed to talk to Emily, to figure out their next steps together. He left work earlier than usual that day. Worry clouded his mind as he drove home. When he stepped inside, Emily could tell right away something was wrong. She was at the kitchen table going over some papers, but immediately pushed them aside when she saw his face. "Michael, what's going on?" Michael took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice calm as he told her what was happening. "He's been watching the building. The police think he could try something. They've got an officer watching the place, but they think it'd be better if we stayed somewhere else. For now." Emily's face turned pale, her hand shaking as she reached for his. "Oh my God, Michael, what are we going to do? Leah can't go through this again." "I know," Michael said, gently squeezing her hand. "We'll figure this out. We can stay at my dad's place for now. It's further from the city and much safer. After our last visit, he offered it to us, just in case. I didn't want to accept it at the time, but now—" Emily nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. "I can't stand this, Michael. I hate that we're always on the move, never able to just live peacefully." Michael pulled her close, holding her tightly. "I hate it too, Emily. But we've got to do what's best for Leah. We have to protect her, no matter what." They spent the next hour packing, working quickly and methodically. To avoid worrying Leah, they framed the sudden trip as a fun getaway to Grandpa's. The idea thrilled her, her recent concerns fading in the excitement of a new adventure. As they loaded the car, Michael paused, taking one last look at the apartment building, what had become their home and refuge. The idea of leaving it, even for a while, filled him with a heavy sadness. But he knew they had no other choice. They had to keep moving forward to protect what they had fought so hard to create. The drive to his father's estate was quiet, a thick tension hanging in the air. Emily reached for Michael's hand, giving him a gentle, reassuring smile. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. "We'll get through this." Michael nodded, squeezing her hand. "We will. We just need to stay strong. For Leah." When they arrived, his father was already waiting. He had taken the situation seriously and had security measures in place around the property. As they pulled up to the large house, Michael felt a sense of relief wash over him. The estate was big, secure, and offered a chance to finally breathe. Leah ran off, eager to explore the expansive gardens, while Michael and Emily unloaded the car. His father approached, his face set with determination. "I've made sure everything is locked down," he said quietly. "You're safe here. Stay as long as you need." Michael nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude. "Thanks. I didn't think we'd need this, but I'm relieved it's an option." Michael's father placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, offering a rare moment of comfort. "We'll get through this as a family, Michael." The anxiety that had been weighing them down started to subside as they settled into the estate, and a flimsy sense of security slowly took its place. Leah quickly embraced their new environment, exploring the gardens and every nook of the sprawling house with curiosity. For her, it felt like an adventure, a brief distraction from the worries that had followed her. But for Michael and Emily, this was a period of deep reflection and careful planning. Night after night, they talked long into the evening, trying to figure out their next move. Michael knew the estate couldn't be their long-term solution, but he also realized they couldn't return to their apartment until they were sure the danger had passed. One evening, sitting on the terrace and watching the sunset over the gardens, Emily looked at Michael, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Do you think we should move? Maybe find somewhere new, where he won't know to find us?" Michael paused, feeling the weight of the decision. "It might be the right call," he said. "But I don't want to uproot Leah again unless we absolutely have to." "She's been through so much already," Emily agreed, her voice laced with concern. "But I don't want to live in fear either. I want her to have a normal life without always looking over her shoulder." Michael sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Maybe it's time for a fresh start, somewhere we can finally leave all this behind." Emily nodded, a sense of determination growing within her. "Then that's what we'll do. We'll find a new place and start over, together." As they sat there, the sky shifting from orange to deep blue, Michael felt a new resolve settle over him. They had faced so many challenges already, and each time they had emerged stronger. This was just another hurdle to clear. "We'll get through this," Michael said, his voice firm, "and when we do, we'll build something even better. A new home, a new life, one where we can finally find peace." Emily smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. "I get what you're saying, Michael. We've come too far to let anything pull us apart now." As the night grew darker and the stars began to shine above, Michael felt a wave of calm settle over him. The past had resurfaced to challenge them, but they weren't the same people they once were. Now they were stronger, more united. Together, they could face whatever lay ahead. They'd been through rough times before, and each time, they had managed to find their way back to better days. This time would be no different. With that in mind, Michael felt confident they'd be all right. No matter what the past tried to bring up, they'd handle it side by side. Deciding to move was the first step toward starting a new chapter. After weeks of searching, Michael and Emily finally found a house in a peaceful neighborhood just outside the city, a place where they could start over, far from the shadows of their past. It was a charming two-story home with a big yard and tall trees that offered both privacy and peace. From the moment they stepped inside, they knew this was where they could build the life they had fought for. The move itself was bittersweet. Packing up the apartment where they had made so many memories wasn't easy, but it had to be done. Leah, always adaptable, welcomed the change with her usual enthusiasm. She couldn't wait to explore her new room, choose new paint colors, and really make the house feel like home. On the day of the move, Michael stood alone in their empty apartment for a final moment, letting the memories wash over him. This was the place where he first brought Leah when she was lost and alone, where they had all started to find one another. It was where he truly became a father in every sense, and where he and Emily had rebuilt their relationship from the ground up. But even with all that, Michael knew it was time to move forward. "We're ready," Emily whispered, coming up beside him. She gently slipped her hand into his, squeezing it softly. "It's time for a new beginning." Michael nodded and looked at her. "Yeah, this is what's best for all of us." They closed the apartment door one last time and headed toward their new home. The drive was filled with anticipation, the weight of the past gradually lifting as they got closer to their future. When they arrived, Leah ran ahead to explore the house, her laughter bouncing through the empty rooms. "This is going to be amazing! Dad!" Leah shouted with excitement in her voice. "I can't wait to start decorating my room!" Michael couldn't help but smile, feeling a warm sense of joy as he watched his daughter, so full of energy and happiness. "We're going to make it exactly the way you want, Leah. This is your room, your home," he reassured her. The next few days were a blur of unpacking, organizing, and getting settled into the new house. Michael and Emily worked together, turning the place into something that truly felt like theirs. They painted the walls, hung up pictures, and arranged the furniture until everything was just right. Before long, the house began to feel more like a home, a cozy, inviting space where they could finally unwind and enjoy life's little moments. One evening, After a long day of unpacking, they decided to take a break and have a family movie night. They all gathered on the couch, with Leah curled up between Michael and Emily, a soft blanket wrapped around them. The movie played in the background, but Michael found himself more drawn to the feeling of warmth and closeness with his family. This was everything he had dreamed of, a deep sense of peace and belonging. As the movie ended, Leah drifted off to sleep, resting against Michael with her soft, even breathing. Michael looked down at her, his heart swelling with pride and love. He gently brushed a stray hair from her face, amazed at how much she had grown and how far they had all come. "She's so happy here," Emily whispered, her voice full of emotion. "So are we," Michael replied, his eyes fixed on Leah. "We've been through so much, but we're stronger now because of it." Emily rested her head on his shoulder, sighing contentedly. "We've found our place, Michael, our home." The next morning, they woke to the sound of birds singing outside their window. The sun shone brightly, bathing the house in a soft, golden glow. It was one of those mornings where everything seemed full of possibility, as if they were on the verge of something wonderful. They spent the day outside, exploring the neighborhood, meeting their new neighbors, and finding the local park where Leah would soon spend many afternoons playing. The community was welcoming, and they immediately felt at home. It was exactly the environment they had hoped for, a place where Leah could grow up feeling safe, loved, and supported. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, they headed back home, exhausted but happy. They chose to have dinner on the back porch, watching the sky fade into soft shades of pink and orange. Michael was flipping burgers on the grill while Emily set out the plates, and Leah was darting around the yard, tossing a ball she had found in the garage. When they finally gathered at the table, the conversation flowed naturally, full of laughter and sharing the highlights of their day. These ordinary moments were the ones that filled Michael with the most joy, reminding him of how far they'd come and the bright future they had ahead. After dinner, they all settled on the porch, watching the stars slowly pop out in the night sky. Leah was curled up in Emily's lap, fighting off sleep, but determined to stay awake just a little longer. "Can we do this every night?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with sleepiness. Michael smiled and gently ran his fingers through her hair. "We can do this anytime you want, Leah. This is our home now, and we can create whatever traditions we want." Leah nodded, her eyelids fluttering shut as she snuggled deeper into Emily's embrace. "I love it here," she mumbled. "I love you, Dad. I love you, Mum." Emily's eyes glistened with tears, and Michael felt his throat tighten with emotion. This was the moment they had fought so hard for, what they had dreamed of during the toughest times. This sense of peace, love, and belonging. "We love you too, sweetheart," Michael whispered, his voice thick with emotion, more than anything. As Leah drifted off to sleep, Michael and Emily sat together in the quiet of the night, holding each other close. They had weathered the storm, and now they stood in the calm of a new chapter. They had finally found their home, their sanctuary, and they knew that no matter what challenges came their way, they would face them together. The hardships of the past had threatened to tear them apart, but instead, they had grown closer, stronger. And as they gazed up at the stars, they knew they had everything they needed to build a life full of love, laughter, and the strong ties of family. This was their fresh start, and they were ready to embrace it, together. If this story of resilience and family love touched your heart, don't forget to like, share what resonated with you most in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for our next uplifting story.